Hello, everyone. I'm Lisa Weber Curry, Manager of Clinical Services at Ascension Counseling Center. You're watching Ascension Counseling Center's video newsletter, where we talk about the services we offer and how you can benefit from them. Thanks for joining us. Coming up in this episode, you'll hear from Suzanne Hamilton, our Director at Ascension Counseling Center. Our topic is suicide prevention. Won't you please stay with us for the next half hour or so? Our newsletter begins right after this message.
Ascension Parish, a parish steeped in tradition. It's a place where generations of families have continued to enjoy a lifestyle that centers on community living and community celebration. It's a place where we care about each other and we care about ourselves. For more than 50 years, the Ascension Counseling Center has continued the tradition of helping individuals and families change behaviors and change lives. The Ascension Counseling Center.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for staying with us. We're joined now by Suzanne Hamilton, Director of Ascension Counseling Center. Suzanne, how are you this morning?
I'm doing well, Lisa. How are you?
I'm good. Before we begin talking about this very important topic of suicide prevention, share a little bit about yourself with us. Give us a little bit background information.
Well, I've been a licensed professional counselor for 25 years, and I've been with Ascension Counseling Center for 9, and I've been the director for 6 years there.
Great. Okay, that's wonderful to know. So, this morning, let's start talking suicide prevention, because as we all know, September is the month of suicide prevention.
Yes.
So enlighten us about suicide.
All right, so suicide is intentionally taking your own life and using some lethal means with the intention of dying. Accidental overdoses, shooting yourself, things like that are not suicide. And that's sometimes what puts it in a little bit of a gray area. Sometimes people take an accidental overdose of their medications, not intending to kill themselves. Other times they do commit suicide, but they don't die from the attempt. And so sometimes the numbers are a little bit loose in terms of knowing exactly how many suicides there are.
Okay, yeah, I can see how it would skew the numbers, because what may look like an intentional suicide was an accident, and sometimes people may associate it with, well, that person was depressed before the accident happened, but it's still an accident nonetheless. Yes. Okay. Talk to us a little bit about the prevalent rates of suicide.
Okay, well, the Centers for Disease Control collects data about suicide.
Okay.
And what they've found in the last date that we have numbers for is 2013.
Okay.
In 2013, 41,149 suicides were reported. And that makes suicide the 10th leading cause of death in America.
That's high.
It is high, and someone in this country dies by suicide every 12.8 minutes.
See, that really brings it home and makes it real when you sit and think that less than 15 minutes, every 15 minutes, if you just want to put it in that term, somebody's actually attempting or committing suicide.
Yes.
That's scary.
One of the other things that's scary about suicide is that the rate of suicide is actually increasing, where all those other 10 death rates,
like cancer,
heart disease, lung problems, those are all declining. So medical care is increasing and improving.
Right.
Suicide is the only one of those high risk factors or conditions that is actually increasing.
Okay.
So we have to be very diligent about getting the word out about it.
Yeah, we have to spread the word more. We have to be mindful of the people that we encounter and paying attention to their habits.
Yes.
Okay. Would you tell us who's most at risk for suicide?
Well, we do have some demographics that whenever we look at suicide, we can look at some people who are at high risk and other people who are at low risk. One of the things is your age.
Okay.
And it may seem that teens have the highest rate. Sometimes people think teens have the highest rate of suicide. And that's not really true. The older you are, the more likely you are to commit suicide. So the highest risk group is people between the ages of 45 and 64.
Okay,
So they are the
interesting.
highest suicide rate.
Okay,
The second highest is people 85 and over.
okay.
And then the third highest is people 65 to 84.
Okay.
One of the reasons that we suspect that those rates are higher is that your health declines. In general, not always,
Right.
but in general, your health declines the older you get. And so
Okay.
people may find themselves in chronic pain or with a terminal illness or alone,
Right.
you know,
Okay.
and so sometimes that can make a difference.
Okay.
Another factor is gender. Males are 4 times more likely than females to commit suicide.
Interesting.
One of the reasons for that is that, and we're talking death by suicide, not attempted suicide.
Right.
One
Okay.
of the reasons for that is that men use more lethal means. Men are more likely to use a gun and to
Okay.
shoot themselves. Women are more likely to take a non-lethal
Like
means such as
pills.
pills.
Okay.
And somebody, the longer it takes you to pass from your attempt, the more likely someone is going to find you. So they are
Right.
more likely to be found and brought to the emergency room and rescued.
Okay, that's interesting. I want to go back a step to when we talk about the age groups that are most at risk. Could it also be that when you're in that 45 to 64 year age gap, where you say that's the highest group who are most at risk, could it also be that's your midlife, where you start to question, did I accomplish the goals I intended to accomplish? Where I am now in life, am I really happy with it? Am I the best person that I could have been? That's a time where people start to reevaluate what they've accomplished, how much time they have left to accomplish their goals, and is it even possible to accomplish their goals? Do you think that weighs heavy on that population?
Yes, and we've all heard the term midlife crisis,
Right.
and that's the age when that's beginning to happen. And if people go through resolve their midlife crisis by getting a sports car or one of those things.
Sometimes starting a second career at that time.
Yeah, and as any stage in our life, we can resolve it successfully or not. And so, yes, that's midlife is a time where people begin to look at their life, at their marriage, at the career accomplishments, and begin to form a decision or make a judgment about whether or not they're where they thought they would be and have achieved what they wanted to achieve. So people could become dissatisfied with their life where they are.
Okay. Very important for people to know, because when we're aware of these things, we can start thinking about them ahead of time. We can start evaluating our lives earlier and making changes to reach the goals we want to reach.
And that's why we're talking about suicide in terms of prevention.
Right.
A large part of that is just education and awareness, and which
Yes.
is our goal right now, is just to make people more aware. And as we go through the show, we'll be putting other warning signs and other risk factors together. And the more of these that you see that you have in your life, then the more attention people need to pay to maybe just a down mood or some time when they're not happy.
Okay, great, important. So men are more likely than women to actually go through with the process of committing suicide. Does ethnicity or race affect those factors as well?
It really does, and white males accounted for 70% of the suicides in 2013.
That's a huge number.
It is. So whites are the leading in suicide numbers, and then the second most frequent is American Indians or Alaska Natives.
Okay. And I think most people would have never thought that. Okay. It's important to know.
And especially with all the talk about white males being the most privileged group.
Right.
Yet the fact that they are the most unhappy and the most likely to commit suicide, it's really an intriguing
It is.
factor.
And it begs for more research
It
into
does,
why.
yes.
Okay.
Also, something as simple as geography plays a role. In the United States, suicide rates are higher in the West, in California, Montana, and then as you move toward the east, suicide drops. And in the east, the suicide rate, I think Connecticut is the smallest suicide rate there is.
Interesting. And
It is.
Connecticut is considered one of the best cities to live in for your career and
Yes.
raising a family. So I can see why that one would have a lower rate. Okay, that's interesting. So now that we know the risk factors, you know, what race and ethnicities are involved, gender, geography, let's talk about some warning signs.
All right. One of the warning signs is just listening to what people say when they talk.
Okay.
And, you know, we talk about how important communication skills are.
Definitely.
And especially with, if we think about males, they're not as likely to communicate as females are. So it's
Right.
really important to listen when people do talk to what they're saying.
Okay.
And so somebody, they may be as obvious as talking about killing themselves. They may say that they have no reason to live. They may complain about being a burden to other people.
Okay.
And this is maybe your people who have chronic illnesses or who
Yes.
are unemployed. They may be in a lot of pain, chronic pain, which they feel is unbearable, or they may talk about feeling trapped. And
Okay.
all of these things, you know, we have a tendency when somebody talks negatively and might say one of these things to try to pump them up and
Right.
tell them how great things are. But so we want to make sure that people are not doing that. If somebody says any one of these things, I have no reason to live, then we should not respond with a list of all the reasons, yeah, that you have to live. What we should do is say, tell me more about that.
Okay.
Or tell me more about how you feel like you're being a burden to me.
Right.
Not, no, you're not a burden to me. I love you. This is, you know, you would do this for me.
Right.
Those are the normal responses, but we need to be aware that sometimes there's a lot more to that. And so we want to explore what people really mean when they're saying any of these statements.
Okay. So it's important to let them finish saying what they're saying, give them permission to say it, listen, because sometimes you really get the answers there when you listen and let them say it. And oftentimes that's their avenue to express their feelings, which can sway them away from suicide because now they're having open dialogue about what they're experiencing.
Somebody's listening to them.
Okay. All right. So what are some behaviors we can look for in somebody considering suicide?
Well, with behaviors, suicide risk is greater if you see a behavior as new
Okay.
or if the behavior has increased.
Okay.
And so maybe it's related to a painful event or a loss or a change in their lives. So if
Okay.
it's not just that you have any one or two of these behaviors, but if they come in combination with some of those
Okay.
other things. So if somebody increases their use of alcohol or drugs, if they're looking, if you see them searching or researching ways to kill themselves, so they might be searching online for materials or searching online for means of killing themselves. They might act recklessly, doing things that are dangerous where they can
Okay.
get hurt or someone else can get hurt.
Okay.
They may go the other route where they might withdraw from activities. They withdraw from family and friends. They may sleep too much or too little. So again, remembering these are changes and
Right.
patterns that people have had. If they've always slept, you
Like
know, 10, 11
teenagers.
hours, yeah, that's,
Yeah.
it's not a warning sign.
Right. Okay.
But they may begin visiting family and friends and saying goodbye to them. Or they may give away their prized possession. If you've got somebody with, let's say, a baseball card collection that they've
Right.
worked on since a child and they're very proud of it, and they start giving it away,
Right.
that could be a behavior that's a warning sign.
Okay.
Or also aggression. If they begin to be more aggressive with themselves or other people, that may be a warning sign as well.
Okay. That's important, and I think aggression shows up a whole lot in teenagers.
You're going to see, yes, teenagers who are depressed or feeling sad are more likely to be irritable or aggressive than
Okay.
sad.
Right. Okay. And that's important. We need to
It
know
is,
that.
yes.
Okay. Tell us about the changes in mood.
Well, people who are considering suicide usually displays one or two or more of those following moods, and that's depression, having a loss of interest in things, having rage, irritability, humiliation, or anxiety.
Okay. That's interesting. And you know, I've also noticed that, and you can tell me if you were aware of this, that sometimes people even become happier it's like they realize my life is coming to an end. I will be out of my misery, out of my pain and suffering. I'm not causing anybody else to suffer any pain or have to put out any extra effort for me. So in these last few days, I can be happier.
Yes, they might experience a sense of peace.
Okay.
And again, it's as if they've had all those other experiences or moods, and then they resolve that they're doing the right thing, and they come to a sense of peace and a sense of closure. Then that's maybe a sign that a suicide attempt is imminent.
Yeah, and I think I love that word you said. They come to a sense of peace. And I think families, friends, coworkers, if you know that person had been struggling, really depressed, maybe even angry, and all of a sudden, you see a shift to a peacefulness, a happiness. Definitely something to look out for.
Yes, and remember, we're looking for all of these things in combination. So you're looking for some of the verbal statements, some of the behaviors, some of the moods. And so when you start beginning to put all of those together, and then they are no longer distressed but peaceful, and they've given things away, and they've called people, and they've said, I'm tired of, I'm not going to be a burden to people anymore. And they put all of that together, then that's a strong indication of an
imminent
suicide attempt.
Okay, so it's important. Look for that combination of behavior and mood changes.
Yes.
Very important. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about, if you will, risk factors with suicide.
Well, the risk factors are the characteristics or conditions that increase the chance of a person attempting suicide.
Okay.
The more risk factors we find, then the higher the risk.
Okay.
And they basically come in 3 categories. One is your mental health condition, one is substance use, and one is serious or chronic pain. Okay. So if someone has the mental health conditions, that would be things like depression, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, borderline or antisocial personality, conduct disorder, anxiety disorder, any of those types of things. And in fact, what we see is that any one of those mental health conditions is present in 90% of suicides. So this is a strong risk factor.
Definitely.
The other thing is substance use, and this could be beginning to use substances or increasing their use. But substances are often found, alcohol, drugs, are often found to contribute towards someone's suicide attempt. So if you find that they have any of these mental health conditions, they're starting to drink a lot more one afternoon, they've had some of the other risk factors that we've talked about or warning signs, then anytime you see them begin to drink or use substances, that's really a time to keep an eye on them.
Okay, sounds important. And I think one of the risk factors here that people don't realize is in using alcohol. Alcohol is actually a depressant. And so people think, okay, I'm drinking alcohol to help cope with how I'm feeling, what I'm experiencing, whether it's a medical condition or mental health or environmental factors. But once they're done with that alcohol, it actually makes them more depressed. And so I think it's important that people are aware of that. Okay.
And then the other piece of it is chronic health problems or chronic pain. And we all know that it's difficult. People have serious conditions such as fibromyalgia, back pain, some of those kind of things. And, whenever you think about living every minute, because when you're in serious pain, your life is broken down into minute by minute. And so whenever you're faced with that kind of thing and you're thinking, I'm going to live every single minute for the next 25 years like this, sometimes it seems to people that it's not worth it. One of the things that we do at our clinic is we have a class for people to live with chronic pain. And we don't use medications, but we teach people all of the things that they need to do to be able to live a more comfortable life.
We teach them how to cope with the chronic pain. Okay, and that's important. And what I think is really interesting with people with chronic health issues, that when you think about it, maybe some of us would think, well, I see people with cancer that will most likely commit suicide, but really it's people who have diagnoses that will let them live for a long amount of time, but constantly ill. Be it chronic pain, be it, constant visits to the doctor, constant injection. Those are the factors that really affect people when they're medically ill and they're thought of suicide.
And especially if we think to the age factor that it's older people, and if we put the chronic pain with that, many older people feel like I've had a good life. I'm
Yes.
ready to go. And I've known people who've said that. Now they didn't commit suicide, but they basically had said, I've lived a good life. I don't regret anything, and I'm never going to get better. This is going to be the quality of my life, so I'm kind of ready to go.
Yeah, I'm okay with it, and they're letting their family know I'm okay with it. Okay, interesting. Are there any other risk factors?
Well, there are some environmental things, which by that I mean things outside of us. Not what we've talked about have been our moods, our actions, our words.
Right.
But on the outside of us, there are some things that contribute
Some external
to
risk
the risk.
factors.
Yes.
Okay.
And one of them is what we call contagion, and that's having someone else exposed or being exposed to someone else's suicide.
Okay.
Or to one of the things about reporting suicide in the media is if it's been found that if they give the details, if they're very graphic, if it's sensationalized,
Right.
then it will cause, or other people call it copycat suicides. So if someone, especially if someone famous has committed suicide, sometimes we see an increase in the suicide rate following a famous or graphic, spectacular type of suicide. Having access to lethal means, and that means, having access to firearms or drugs that you can take. And that's very common in South Louisiana. We're a sportsman's paradise.
Exactly.
Most people have guns and rifles and hunting and things like that. So many people do have access to guns, and that makes it very important to lock everything up.
Right.
If you have children or families, give the key to one person, and they can unlock it for you. So make sure that all of those types of things are secure.
Okay. That's important.
Very.
Yes.
Prolonged stress, having, for kids, it can be bullying at school. It can be relationship problems that go on for a very long time, harassment, unemployment, any of those kind of stressful life situations, divorce, moving, especially if they linger for a very long time.
Exactly.
Or sometimes for one family member, or some people are forced to move due to a job or something else, and they grieve that very seriously. They did not want to move.
Yeah, they don't adjust well to it, so it makes it difficult.
Yes.
And you talk about unemployment problems, but also employment-related problems.
Yes.
Can cause prolonged stress. If people are having problems on the job that remain unresolved, or they feel like they're being treated unfairly, that can lead to suicide as well.
Yes, especially depending on the economy. Sometimes it's easy to go from one position to another, and sometimes it's impossible. And so if you find yourself stuck in a very stressful situation, especially people who are reporting to their manager and then their supervisor, and they're following the protocol and nothing ever changes,
Right.
They feel very helpless.
Exactly.
And they may develop feelings of hopelessness, and that might lead to depression, and then it can lead to some of the other things that we're talking about.
Exactly. Because I know for a period of time we saw an increase in suicide when the stock market started to crash, and those who were working in the stock market or in these major investment firms. So all those factors are things we need to look at when they're happening to help prevent suicide.
Yes.
Okay.
And we've talked about some of these already, but also stressful life events like divorce or death of a family member or losing a job. Some of those losses can be difficult to go through.
And you talk about bullying, it makes me think that's why I think as a people we automatically assume that suicide in teenagers would be the highest as opposed to midlife, because lately we've seen so much of it on TV. They talk about it, it's happening, it's the bullying. So I think to go along with suicide prevention, we have to establish ways of treating this bullying. Not only the person that's being bullied but the ones who are also doing the bullying and the ones who stand around and watch it happen and never report it. So I think it would be important to invest in programs to help schools to better help our kids with bullying.
Especially if we think about the lifespan, which we, as counselors we often do.
Yeah.
You know, you could have a situation where a child is being bullied in school, and then they get older, and then they have breakups in relationships. They get employed, and it's a difficult situation. Maybe they're being harassed. Maybe they get fired. They might go through a divorce or have to move back home with parents. Or, you know, if you think about those, a series of these situations happening during the life, it also, you know, with one piling upon the other, it also might explain why an older person is committing suicide as opposed to a younger. And you know, we don't have a lot of research that shows why that is, but you can kind of put some of these things together and make some assumptions. Whether they're true or not, we don't know.
Exactly. And there's always ongoing research in suicide, and that's something I think we'll be doing for as long as we're here. We're going to do research to find out more answers. You also talk about historical factors. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, there are some things in our history, family history of suicide. If you have someone in your family who's committed suicide, then you are more likely to commit suicide yourself. So as you're talking with a loved one about them making comments about, you know, I'm a burden, you see some of the warning signs here. If you think about whether or not someone else in their family has attempted or committed suicide, then you need to be a lot more concerned. Family history of mental health conditions. And so we've talked about mental health conditions being present 90% of the time. So if family has mental health conditions and the individual has a history of mental health conditions younger in life, then that's a warning sign as well. Especially if the individual has their own previous suicide attempts. If someone has attempted suicide in the past, they're much higher risk for
trying
attempting
it again.
And then also we see that childhood abuse plays a role in later suicide. So some factors in our childhood and in our past can take us to the point of suicide in our present.
Okay, very important historical factors. So now that we know more about suicide, tell us what we can do to prevent suicide.
Well, one is what we're doing right now, and that's trying to increase public awareness. So just helping people know what the warning signs are and what they should do whenever they think that someone is in danger of suicide. And so we are going around, we're going to all the parish council meeting, all the city councils, and done official proclamations that this is Suicide Prevention Month. We are reaching out to other agencies. We are putting articles in the newspapers. We're doing our newsletter. This electronic newsletter. We did our electronic newsletter that we mail out to people. And we're partnering with the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. A lot of this is their information. And so we, you know, at our agency, we try to do public awareness about a lot of topics, and when we do that, we try to partner with someone who's already doing that good work. So they
especially
are
somebody on a national level that can give national attention.
And they have a lot of excellent materials. And so we're encouraging people to talk about it. And one of the things that we encourage people to do is whenever you see somebody has some warning signs, just go ahead and ask them, are you thinking about suicide? It's a myth that saying that will put suicide in someone's head if they haven't thought about it before. That is not true.
I'm so glad you said that, because so many people believe in that myth and they avoid the word suicide at all costs.
And just say it. If you can't say it in your mirror. Look at yourself and practice it.
Exactly.
And so that you can say it to the person that you believe is showing a lot of warning signs and risk signs. So ask, are you thinking about committing suicide? And they'll tell you yes or no. And then the second thing we want to ask is, do you have a plan? If they say, yes, I am thinking about suicide, then we want to ask, how are you thinking about doing it? What are you thinking about? And they'll tell you, I'm going to jump off the bridge, I'm going to shoot myself, I'm going to take my mother's leftover pain pills now that she's gone.
Right.
They'll tell you if they have, if people think about it, they fantasize about it, they just run through it over and over, all the different
Right.
means, and they try to come up with the best one. They don't want to be a burden to people, even in their suicide attempt.
Right.
They don't want to create a difficult situation for the people in their lives, so they'll think about the different ways to do it.
Okay.
So first of all, are you thinking about suicide? And then the second one is, do you have a plan? How would you do it if you were to do it?
Okay.
And then the third one is, do you have the means to accomplish that?
Very
And
important.
so yes, if they say, I'm thinking about suicide and I think I'm going to take an overdose of pills, do you have access to pills? Do you have a
Right.
lot of pills? Well,
And
no.
where do you keep those pills?
Yeah,
if
where are
you do
those
have
pills? Yes.
access?
And
Okay.
so if you say, if you say, are you thinking about suicide? They say yes. Do you have a plan in place? They say yes, I'm going to take all of Mama's leftover pain pills. And then you say, well, do you have the access? Yes, I
Right.
have Mom, her pills are right here.
Okay.
Then you need to take those with you when you leave, and not
Exactly.
leave that person alone. You need to get them some help.
Right.
So increasing people's awareness, talking about it, asking those three important questions. Are you thinking about suicide? How are you going to do it? Do you have the means? Some people may say, well, I'm going to shoot myself. And so then you ask, well, do you have a gun? Well, no, I don't have a gun and I don't really have access to it. Okay,
Okay.
then you know that the imminent danger is not really there.
Okay.
They may have a plan, well, you know, my cousin hunts and I'm going to go get one of his guns.
Right.
He's out of town, but when he comes back on Saturday, that's what I'm going to do. And so then, you know, you have a little bit of time, you can put some things in place.
Right. To include warning that cousin to make sure it's locked up.
Everything is
Yeah.
locked up.
So talking about it, you know, letting other people know who can help that person is really important to do. And,
Yeah, and then we want to go, that's helping people who are friends, you know, peer help.
Right.
We also want people to take advantage of professional help.
Exactly.
And so that would be things such as calling or coming by to 911 or going
Right.
to the nearest emergency room. If you suspect that someone is suicidal and you still don't feel competent to kind of go through all that, then they can come to Ascension Counseling Center.
Right.
We do suicide and risk of harm assessments free of charge, and that's on a walk-in basis. We
Great.
will drop what we're doing and do a risk assessment.
Exactly.
And if we feel like that person needs to be hospitalized, we'll arrange that. Go to
Right.
the emergency room, you know, we'll arrange that.
Very
Also,
important.
people can call 911 and ask for help. An ambulance will pick them up, or the police will come. If you don't have transportation, someone will come and pick you up.
Definitely.
And so you need to do that. Don't let that stand in your way. So calling for help is a very important part of
It
that.
is, and the police department responds quickly. They will go out and do a welfare check on someone if you're concerned about their safety. So it's important to know those kinds
Yes.
of things. Okay. So any last minute comments you want to make, advice? Because this has been a very interesting topic and a very helpful topic to help our audience. So any last minute advice or information you want to give to our audience about suicide prevention?
Well, I do want to share that there's an event coming up. Again, it's hosted by the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention.
Okay.
If you go to their website at afsp.org, you're going to find a wealth of information about
Right.
prevention and warning signs.
Give that
and
website again.
It's AFSP for American Foundation of Suicide Prevention .org. There's also a telephone number there that people can call, a helpline that's staffed 24 hours that you can talk to someone if you're feeling suicidal or if you know someone who is. They also have a local event coming up, and this is the annual suicide walk. It's a community walk called Out of the Darkness, and it's going to be at Lamar Dixon Expo Center on October the 24th, beginning at, registration begins at 9 a.m. The walk begins at 10:30, and it ends at noon. This is, for some of you who know, this is the walk that's hosted by Jamie Savoy, who's very involved in this. And so we encourage everyone to come out and take part in that walk to raise awareness for suicide prevention.
Okay, great. And that's October 20th, right?
October 24th.
Okay.
At 9:30 for registration, 10:30 the walk begins. And this is somewhat of a memorial walk, so especially if you have someone who's committed suicide that you want to walk in their honor, you may do that.
Okay, that's very important. So let's show up, participate in the walk, and get the word out about suicide prevention. Suzanne, thanks for being here
You're
today.
welcome.
Please stay tuned. Ascension Counseling Center's video newsletter continues right after this.
Ascension Parish, a parish steeped in tradition. It's a place where generations of families have continued to enjoy a lifestyle that centers on community living and community celebration. It's a place where we care about each other and we care about ourselves. For more than 50 years, the Ascension Counseling Center has continued the tradition of helping individuals and families change behaviors and change lives. The Ascension Counseling Center.
Thanks for spending your time with us for this episode of Ascension Counseling Center's video newsletter. You can catch replays of the program exclusively on Ascension 21 on the days and times listed on your screen, or anytime on Ascension 21's YouTube channel. We look forward to many more episodes where we can talk about what's available at Ascension Counseling Center and how our programs can help change lives. Please join us again next time. Our conversation will focus on domestic violence prevention. Remember, Ascension Counseling Center is here by way of your support. We are a department of Ascension Parish government, and as such, we are all parish employees. We're funded by a 2-mil property tax millage, which means that $2 from every $1,000 you pay in taxes goes to support our agency so we can provide free and low-cost mental health and substance abuse outpatient services to residents of Ascension. We have 2 locations, one in Gonzales at 1112 Southeast Ascension Complex Boulevard. It's off Worthy Road, across from the courthouse and next to the health unit. And one at 419 Memorial Drive in Donaldsonville. It's next door to Prevost Hospital. You can reach us at either location by calling 225-450-1016. You can also find us on the web at ascensionparish.net/MH and on Facebook at Ascension Counseling Center. Thanks for your support, and until next time, from everyone at Ascension Counseling Center, thank you for watching.